Hello, welcome to another episode of our beginner's guide on brand identity design for Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. My name is Manuel from Kata Studios. Today we are going to be learning how, when, and the importance of grouping elements in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. I have two samples from here, one from Photoshop and the other from Illustrator. Okay, so we'll be trying out the samples from here, but before we get into try to walk around with what we have existing, we have to understand first of all how grouping functions. Okay, so now let's get into a new Canva which I created, and I'm going to show you a little instance of what I mean. Just stay with me. So now we are going to create a rectangle from here, and we create another rectangle. Let's just duplicate this, and we duplicate this again. Okay, now if you want to move around these elements, dragging them with the selection tool won't be possible. All you need to do is to select all and drag all of them around. Okay, now this is very okay with what we have, but what if we have a third element, possibly a circle or something that looks like a circle actually? Then we have this color to be yellow, and we want to move all these elements to the edge except the yellow. The problem is that when we try this first format, it won't work because we have the yellow inside of here. Except we hold the shift key and click on the yellow. Now it has deselected the yellow and we can proceed with the rest. Now that is a stressful thing to do. I don't advise you to go through that process. Now, the second way to do this is by holding the shift key and selecting all elements you want to move and moving them around. Okay? But we are still not going to do that. Remember, this course is about grouping elements, and the grouping element is important to make your work more easier. Okay, so to group elements, all you need to do is to select all elements holding the shift key, hold the shift key in your keyboard and select all elements you want to group. Okay, once you're done, click on Ctrl and G. Automatically, those elements are grouped. You can move them by just one click. Just drag around. Make sure you are first selecting the selection tool. This is the selection tool and this is the direct selection tool. Now this brings us to the second level of this course, understanding the difference between a selection tool in Adobe Illustrator and the direct selection tool. Now, a selection tool simply sees a group as a single element. What it means is that any element that is grouped, a selection tool sees it as a singular element, just as it sees this element that is just singular on its own. So it means it moves everything that is inside of that group at the same time on drag. You get the point? Now, but direct selection tool in the other hand sees everything, whether grouped or not grouped, as singular elements. So it practically can move these elements separately, and it can also move these elements separately. Now, when we move these elements, if you try to move this with the direct selection tool, this element will still retain its state which the direct selection tool placed it. So we can move all of them as so. And we want to include this one to our movement or to our group. All you need to do is to hold the shift key, select it, and still click on Ctrl and G. Automatically, we can now move everything around. So this is practically how to move elements, and this is how grouping functions in Adobe Illustrator. This is just the reason why actually why you need to move elements like so is in cases where you have complex layers, okay, multiple layers, or in cases where you have elements that are not in the same categories but you want to actually control the other ones in the same categories easily without stressing yourself or wasting a lot of time while you are doing your design. So let's try out let's try to understand what is going on here. As you can see, this element might be with 100 different layouts, okay. As you can see from below here, we use the selection tool, we can drag out all of these elements from here. But we use the direct selection tool, we can only drag out a singular element from there. I hope you understand what's happening here. So it makes it easier for us to move elements around. It makes it very easier for us to move elements around. For instance, move this lady around, move this around. This is a totally multiple version of elements. As you can see, I'm separating all of the elements one after the other. This is just how. By the way, to go back to the previous stage, just hit on Ctrl and Z. This is just how grouping works. And the function, why it is easy for work, which is the importance, is that you can practically move elements of the same category all around at the same time. Like this flower at the back of the lady, you can move all of them, but you are using direct selection tool, you can only move a particular part of that particular flower. The same applies to the text. You can move a singular part of the text, but when you are using the direct selection tool, you can move all part of that particular text. I hope you get that. That is simply how to move elements in Adobe Illustrator. Let's move over to Photoshop and see what we have from here. We have a little bit of difference in Photoshop. I will have to mention that. Now in Photoshop it's totally different, a little different. Why it is different is that this tool you see here, this tool, this one now, let me zoom closely. This one you see here, what is the name? Say it's the move tool. This move tool is actually, if it is compared to Photoshop Illustrator, is actually the direct selection tool, but in steroid. Remember I told you the direct selection tool doesn't care whether you are in a group or not. It selects you singularly, it singles you out. While the selection tool gives priority to grouped elements and move all of them as a singular element. Now we have this problem here. We have only one tool here. We have only the move tool. We don't have the direct selection tool or the what is it called? The selection tool. Now, to move elements, selecting this, we can move elements singularly, like you can drag this out and that. But that's not the purpose of this course. The purpose of this course is to learn how to group elements in Photoshop. Okay? Now, to group elements will bring us back to understanding why these functions like this and how to override it. Now, stay with me, okay? Now, what you need to do here is to select all elements. Make sure you are zoomed closely to the element, very close to elements which you want to actually select. Why? Because if you don't zoom closely to elements, when you select an element and select another element, you might find it difficult to select the last element. Like now, I can't see the arrow key. Let me zoom closely. I can't find the arrow key now. Okay? But watch what happened when I zoom closely. I can now find the arrow key to select. Okay? Very good. So now what it practically means is that you can select this element, hold the shift key, select the second one, select the third one, and select the arrow, and we are done. Now these elements can be moved around at the same time, but it is not grouped. Now look closely from here. These elements are not grouped. They are only selected at once, and you can move them around. That's why I told you that tool, this insane tool over here, this move tool, is actually a direct selection tool and a selection tool in steroid. It functions as both based off on what the function you or the intent of your selection. Now we have to group these elements, and I will show you how to move these elements around. When you group an element in Photoshop, you don't just move it with the move tool. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so now we click on Ctrl and G. We have grouped these elements. Now to move these elements, let's drag outside it. We still have the same problem. Now what do? Make sure you select on the grouped element, which is the group folder which we have over here. Okay, the group 3. Select on it. It will select everything. If you try to move again, nothing happens. Okay, so select on it. What you need to do is to click on this edge. Just click on this edge or whatever edge that brings up the arrow up and down. See the arrow? See the arrow we have here? We have an arrow up and down. Okay, so click on the edge once. Okay, and you can now drag all elements around. When you click outside and try to drag again, you have the same problem again until you select the folder or the group folder and you click on the edge. You can now proceed with dragging around. So that's practically how to drag around in Photoshop. It's a little bit stressful compared to Illustrator that have dedicated elements that controls, or dedicated widget that controls that particular function. So this is practically how to do grouping in Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. If you have any question about this, drop that in the comment section below. Please do subscribe if you are not subscribed. Share this video if you find it interesting, and make sure to like so it can be shown to more people out there. Okay? Once again, my name is Manuel from Kata Studios. Do have a wonderful day.